Welcome everybody. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to kind of share with you what's happened over the last year. And for me personally, I've been doing this work for 16 years, and I feel very, very excited right now because I feel like the world is meeting us. It feels like people really are beginning to appreciate how important it is for us to know where our food comes from and to know the people who grow it. And it's really, I think, the beginnings of real community. And you know, this is a great moment. It's been hard work, and it started as a fad and maybe a trend, but certainly here in Vermont, it's been an enduring one. But I think people more and more really begin to see this not just as something nice and cute, but something very real. And so I think you'll be excited to hear what we're up to, and I will leave it at that. Before I turn it over to Lindsay, I would just like to introduce our board members. From the oldest member, or I should oldest in the sense of being with us the longest on the board, Susan Smiley, Al Carnatz, Emily Landsberger, Charlie DiPrincio, Scott Green, and Becky Madden, and most recently, Neely Jennings. So I want to thank all of them for keeping the ACORN seed alive and well and carrying it forward. And thank you to all the board members who have been part of ACORN's efforts through the years. So we'll bring this or get this meeting going, and I'll turn it over now to Lindsay, our executive director.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so everyone gets to see sweet PowerPoint presentation we put together. Are you able to see my screen? Can somebody say yes?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Please keep your microphones on mute until we open up the conversation and Q&A at the end. We really appreciate you taking the time being here tonight. Typically, we do like to host these meetings in person, like we were talking about earlier, either at Flatbread or one of our local breweries. But for the time being, this will have to suffice. It's a pleasure to be speaking here for the first time as ACORN's executive director, a title I received last January and feel honored to have as we work towards a more resilient food system for our community. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathered here and holding this presentation on the unceded traditional lands of the Abenaki Nation. The Western Abenaki are the traditional caretakers of these Vermont lands and waters, which they call Indakana or Dawnland. We remember their connection to this region and the hardships they continue to endure. We give thanks for the opportunity to share in the bounty of this place and to protect it. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Abenaki community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. For the first part of this evening's presentation, I'm going to recap ACORN's work from the last year, cover our goals for the next 12 months, and then introduce our panelists for the evening. We'll have about 45 minutes of hearing from the panel, then we'll open it up to Q&A and a general discussion for anyone who wishes to stay on and chat at the end. Again, please keep your microphones muted until then. I am hearing some background noise. Thank you. So what is ACORN? Historically, the Addison County Relocalization Network has been primarily a networking organization. We don't have a physical office or full-time staff. Our programs are achievable because of our dedicated working board and our invaluable community partners. We have served as a catalyst and incubator for new initiatives and pride ourselves on our ability to be flexible and adapt to the current needs of the local food system. ACORN's mission is to promote the growth and health of local food and agriculture in Vermont's Champlain Valley by providing support to our farmers and food producers, engaging in food education, and ensuring access to healthy food for all members of our community. So how do we do that? For the past 16 years, as Jonathan said, ACORN has been nimble and dynamic with its programs shifting to respond to what's currently happening in our world. Of course, COVID affected ACORN just as it did everyone else. Long-standing programs such as the Tour de Farms Biking Farm Tour, the Champlain Valley Guide to Local Food and Farms, and the Producer and Buyer Forum were canceled in 2020. We were able to bring back the tour and the guide this year. New opportunities that emerged last year, such as the Eat Local Vermont app and our soon to launch online market, continue to develop and grow. With continued dedicated help from our community partners, we were able to operate the third year of the Pharmacy Food as Medicine program. And of course, our efforts in educating the community never stopped. New programs we've taken on this year, including acting as a hosting organization for the annual Rural Vermont State House to Farmhouse event and Farm to School education with Addison Central School District. We'll dig a little deeper into these programs in a few minutes. When we say we're a network, this is what we mean. Here's a list of partners past and present. Without their support, our work wouldn't be possible. To quote the Agrarian Trust, who was our keynote presenter at last year's annual meeting, our power and resilience lies in our relationships. Now here's a look at our 5-year financial history. We wanted to show the immediate effects the COVID shutdown had on us in 2020 and the incredible bounce back we experienced this year. You can see on the slide that ACORN is certainly experiencing an exciting period of growth. We're grateful to recently have welcomed Neely Jennings to the board as treasurer and Shauna Gabbett as a consulting bookkeeper, both of whom will support us as we navigate this transition. Now a look behind the scenes. You'll see program revenue was the largest source of revenue this year, which is due to an amazing year of ad sales in the local food and farm guide and a sold out Tour de Farms bike ride, along with a high number of Tour de Farms sponsorships. Along with a strong annual appeal with donations from our neighbors and local businesses, our community really came out in support of local food programming this year. The pharmacy program, the mobile app, and online market also contributed to our funding in 2021. Here's a look at where that money is spent. As we have very little overhead costs beyond our website, insurance, and CRM software, most of the funding we raise goes directly to project management and communications, with pharmacy being the biggest project, followed by the Tour de Farms, the guide, and the development and maintenance of the app and online market. Now here's a look at the highlights of the 2021 pharmacy program. For those unfamiliar with pharmacy, this Food as Medicine program connects local families who are experiencing diet-related illness and/or food insecurity with prescriptions for free CSA shares from 3 local farms. This year, we were able to provide 65 families with 14 weeks of fresh fruits and veggies from Last Resort Farm, New Leaf Organics, and Lester Farm and Market. We continued with curbside delivery, and instead of offering samples of recipes families can make with that week's share, we included a weekly newsletter with recipes and offered 2 in-person cooking classes. Tri-Valley Transit assisted with food delivery to families with transportation challenges, and Middlebury Rotary provided funding to cover 2 additional CSA bags in the fall to extend the season. Data from our pre and post surveys is not quite ready, but we do have some initial feedback for some of our participants. You can see here a few of the anecdotal quotes that were filled out in our exit survey, with many folks saying the program made it easier for them to eat healthily, discover new recipes, and help with weight loss and diabetic-friendly meal planning. In order to run the pharmacy program, we have a pharmacy committee that is comprised of folks from the Department of Health, Porter Medical Center, the Middlebury Co-op, Rise Vermont, Hope, farmers, and the member families. The Rosie Pebble Farm and Orchard donated their cold storage room and space to pack the bags. Aquavite donated their van to help us transport the food, and we used Hannaford Career Center's parking lot for distribution. This is truly a community effort. We also had an amazing intern from Middlebury College who assisted with the logistical and educational components of the program. So here there's a video. Is it playing? We have a video that you can see what a weekly pharmacy share looks like. Here we go. Is it playing on anybody's computer?
No.
Let me see here. All right, so one technology glitch. I'll try to include that in a newsletter and on our website. It's a video of us packing the bags one week, so you could see all the different food that goes into a share. Really beautiful produce from the farms. And you see Anna there from Hope, who is also delivering food from Hope. So we had some really full bags this year. Because we weren't handing out samples of recipes, we hosted 2 cooking classes this year. Local budget-friendly chefs Matt Laux and Woody Danforth, ACORN board member and Middlebury Co-op marketing education and membership assistant manager Emily Landenberger, and Rise Vermont program manager Michelle Gilbert all volunteered their time to make these classes happen. The Hannaford Career Center Glass Onion Kitchen was also offered free of charge, and we were able to have 2 fun interactive classes with a small group of pharmacy members. Now, going back in time to the March 2020 shutdown, when restaurants, institutions, and farmers markets closed, ACORN wanted to help farmers and food producers fill the gaps of those lost markets. We created a pilot online farmers market with curbside delivery that ran for 5 weeks in April and May, injecting $10,000 into the local food and ag economy. We shut down the market once farmers markets reopened and wrote a case study with the lessons we learned, which is available on our website. With assistance from a UNH grad student and now board member, Amanda Landry, we then undertook 7 months of research to investigate what kind of online market would make sense for our region. The research led us to shift from a direct-to-consumer focus to a business-to-business focus. After speaking with food hubs and online market managers around the state and the US, we also realized we didn't need to reinvent the wheel by creating our own software as previously envisioned. ACORN landed on using Local Food Marketplace, an established platform currently used by food hubs across the country to facilitate the online market. The software also allows products from different small and medium-sized producers to be aggregated, streamlining transactions and making it easier for producers to connect with wholesale buyers. Here you can see some visuals of the food system, the Food Hub network, and how we envision the online market to work. With funding from a city market seedling grant, we purchased a license from Local Food Marketplace. Beginning this past summer, ACORN soft launched the platform, created a landing page, and participated in trainings to learn the platform. We began onboarding producers this summer, but had to postpone the onboarding as most producers were deep in the growing season. Another challenge we encountered was many producers vocalized the need for a physical food hub to aggregate, store, and distribute products. Lastly, ACORN needed more capacity in terms of staff to support the online market. The seedling grant allowed us to pursue additional sources of funding. Just last month, ACORN was awarded the Specialty Crop Block Grant to fund a part-time market manager and a sales and marketing manager. We are also organizing and facilitating monthly farmer steering committee meetings and are part of an emerging Western Vermont food hub network. Most recently, we hired Alex Arroyo as our online market manager. Alex brings his experience as produce buyer at the Middlebury Co-op, as well as farmer at Fuller Mountain Farm. We're very excited to have Alex on board. A separate grant will fund the development of a business plan and feasibility study for a zero carbon food hub. This business plan will bring us one step closer to realizing the long-term dream of a centralized physical aggregation, storage, and distribution site used in conjunction with the online market. We will also continue the development of a statewide distribution network to better collaborate and connect with other food hubs throughout Vermont. The Climate Energy Action Center of Addison County, also known as CEAC, has determined that the 3 leading causes of greenhouse gas emissions in our county are agriculture, transportation, and buildings. This zero carbon food hub would address all three sectors. We're also in talks with another local nonprofit to share a space on Exchange Street, but it's too soon to release those details. So I encourage you to sign up for Cultivating Connections, our monthly e-newsletter on the bottom of our homepage if you're not yet a subscriber. The timing of all these emerging projects is certainly worth noting. As I'm sure you're all aware, we're currently experiencing the effects of the global supply chain on our food supply. The plastic maple syrup jugs our sugar makers rely on are becoming scarce due to rising machinery costs. Italian pasta makers are fretting over a shortage of durum wheat due to drought in Canada, and the New York Times is predicting this Thanksgiving could be the most expensive meal in the history of the holiday, due in part to shortages in our supply chain. If you've been to the co-op recently, you probably noticed some bare shelves, despite Herculean efforts by buyers and staff to keep the shelves filled. The co-op staff is working around the clock to source items from new producers in an effort to fill these gaps. But between buying criteria assessments, price assessments, entering items into the POS system, generating tags for shelves, procuring orders, and receiving and stocking, onboarding new items is a lengthy process. In the end, these adjustments will most likely lead to greater resilience for the co-op and our community. At the end of the day, we need to be sourcing from more smaller distributors and independent producers, shortening our supply chains wherever we can. Here's another photo of the shelves at the co-op. Around the same time as the shutdown in spring 2020, a few students from Middlebury College responded to ACORN's request for help building a map-based mobile app. We saw an opportunity to use the guide's list of 250 farms and food producers in our region and move it online to ensure our community could continue finding local food despite the pandemic and not printing the guide. The students organized a new club called Mid-Dev to ensure the app's continuity, and with funding from Co-op Insurance, the app launched in February 2021. In collaboration with the Center for an Agricultural Economy in Hardwick, we added producers in the Northeast Kingdom in September. We're looking forward to continuing our statewide expansion as partner organizations gain the capacity to do so. We're also launching a desktop version of the app to increase the platform's accessibility. Rural Vermont State House to Farmhouse is an annual statewide event that provides farmers, farm workers, and legislators the opportunity to build relationships and engage in rich dialogue about how policy can support the transition to a resilient and equitable agriculture that benefits all of our people, communities, and landscapes. ACORN began serving as the Addison County host organization last year when it was held online, and Blue Ledge Farm was the virtual farm host. This year, we were fortunate enough to host it in person at Full Belly Farm. This is grassroots local food advocacy in its truest form, and we are thankful to rural Vermont for their efforts in making this event happen every year. That brings us to today and what's coming in 2022. We'll continue to relocalize our food system in the ways most appropriate at this time. We are fundraising for the pharmacy program and hope to grow it by 40% to serve 90 families if funding allows. We would also like to extend the season with monthly pickups through December, something we had hoped to do this year. We are moving the Tour de Farms to a new town to engage more producers and continue to attract riders. We're hiring an intern to help with the 2022 guide, and we'll continue to work on expanding Eat Local Vermont to include farms across the state and launching the desktop version of the app. With the recent hiring of Alex, we will launch the online market this winter and dive deep into the Zero Carbon Food Hub feasibility study and business plan to crack the very hard nut of competing with the industrial food distribution system without raising food prices for eaters or cutting into margins for producers. Realizing the importance of a strong local food community that respects the health of the soil, our water, non-human beings, that pays farmers, farm workers, and food systems workers fair wages and provides equitable access to nourishing food to everyone is paramount. If you agree and value what we're doing, please consider making a donation to ACORN. Any amount, large or small, is appreciated. Even small monthly donations of $5 are welcome. Donations are accepted via PayPal on our website, acornvt.org, or by sending a check to the address listed on the slide. We have a goal of raising $15,000 by the end of the year, which we think is achievable with a community as invested in supporting our local food system as this one is. Thank you again for joining us this evening. It's now time for our panel. I'm going to stop sharing. And I would invite the panelists to please turn on their videos. Everyone's here. And you can probably unmute yourselves whenever you'd like. So we decided to host a panel this year rather than a singular keynote speaker to gain insight from various perspectives around the local food community and hear what's happening on the ground. I think everyone's already turned off their cameras, but if you also would like to turn on speaker view in the top right-hand corner of your Zoom window, that'll help highlight the speaker instead of having all of the small squares, but it's totally up to you. And feel free to drop questions in the chat box during the panel, or you can hold on to them until afterwards when you can unmute yourself. So I'm going to give a little background about each panelist before asking them to introduce themselves as well. Samantha Langevin is the chef at American Flatbread, Middlebury Hearth, where she spends a lot of time making messes and then cleaning them up. A resident of Bristol, she lives with her partner on a small vegetable and fruit farm and is a strong advocate and supporter for local food production and education. Samantha also serves on the board of the Middlebury Natural Foods Co-op. Laura Vacca has worked in the food service industry for over 35 years in a variety of commercial and institutional settings. For the past 16 years, she has worked in child nutrition, bringing her passion for wholesome and tasty foods to students in Addison County. Understanding that the keystone of wholesome foods is sourcing locally, she works to engage the school community in enjoying all the bounty of Addison County through education, community partnerships, and procurement for school meal programs. Anna Freund is the food programs coordinator at Hope. She is a 7th generation Vermonter and grew up on a small dairy farm in Addison County. Anna studied animal science at the University of Vermont. She and her husband ran a diversified farm for 10 years. The farm was one of the first in Vermont to graze sheep within a solar array. Anna is passionate about food systems, the environment, and building strong communities. Pauline helps run Golden Russet Farm, a certified organic vegetable and cut flower farm in Shoreham. After spending several years working at a nonprofit in Burlington, she returned to the farm in 2018 to help run it alongside her parents and their seasonal crew. In her free time, she mostly spends time scheming her next meal, fermenting and preserving food, and planning for the week ahead. Welcome, panelists, and thank you again for being here this evening. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So Lindsay kind of gave an overview of a little bit of my background. So I'll just fill you in on my experience at Hope so far. I joined Hope as the food programs coordinator at the very end of June this year. And it's been a great summer and fall networking with farm partners, local organizations, students, volunteers, and the community members that we serve. I'm hoping to do more of that as the gleaning season winds down.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Pauline?
Hi, everyone. And Lindsay, thanks so much for including me in this group of people. I'm Pauline. I help run Golden Russet Farm out here in Shoreham. I've been back on the farm this is wrapping up my 4th season. I spent many summers working on the farm in high school and college, and then worked off the farm for several years. And there became a point when my parents were talking about retiring, and I realized that if I wanted to come back and potentially take it over, the clock was kind of ticking. And so I decided to move back down to Addison County and work alongside them about 4 years ago, and have really enjoyed being back there and getting my hands dirty. I'm currently in the process of figuring out about taking the farm over from them. So we're kind of in the middle of that transition right now. But yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, thanks for being here. Samantha.
Yeah, hi. I'm Samantha. It's wonderful to be included in this group. As Lindsay said, I'm the current chef at American Flatbread in Middlebury, but I actually come to cooking from a long background in outdoor and farm-based education, primarily with a large nonprofit that's a farm and wilderness preserve in California, where I taught a variety of subjects for all ages, agricultural science, culinary science, social justice topics.
And it was a really great place to also learn about the importance of local food in that it provides fruits, vegetables, dairy, meat, and eggs for the local community. And so to bring it to the present, I have been at Flatbread now for a little over 5.5 years, which has also been a great way to be immersed in everything that Addison County has to offer. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
And Laura.
Thank you so much. I'm Laura, and I have, as Lindsay shared, been working in food service for 35 years, but I really have spent a lifetime in kitchens. And when I was 13 years old, I would come home from school and cook for my family who were all at work, and we would eat together, and gathering around food was always a really important part of my life. And I quickly learned the value of preparing and sharing a meal together, and how important that is, not only for our community, but for our social emotional learning. And that came full circle when I spent time working in a nursing home, cooking for elderly that could come through my kitchen, and them sharing stories about their own growing up and the value of cooking and dining and sharing together. And so becoming a school food professional is really a form of activism for me, and so that I can share that experience that I think is really lost in our current society for a lot of reasons and of nobody's fault, but hopefully bring some of that value into education and teach kids how to prepare food, how to choose food, how to listen to their own bodies, and decide what is good for them. So I really appreciate being part of this community.
Those are all really strong experiences for us to be learning at such a young age. So thank you for the work you do. Okay, so we have some questions that we're going to ask the panelists, and then feel free, like I said, if anything comes up or you want to dig deeper into anything, throw it in the chat or hold it to the end, write it down. And Emily Landenberger, who's on the call, will also help moderate that chat. Okay, so the first question I have is, what is something about the business or field that you're in that you don't think people fully know about or understand? And I'm going to let you all choose who goes first.
I can go first on this one. So I've been thinking a lot about this the last week or so. And one thing that really came up for me, because it's really timely with the end of the season in some ways, is starting around probably Labor Day, really, I start getting asked the question, so things must really be slowing down for you guys. And I always kind of chuckle when I get asked that question, because our season really actually feels like it's ramping up around then. So our farm we start off in the spring by selling retail bedding plants to home gardeners, and then we switch over to mostly a wholesale vegetable operation the rest of the year, with a strong emphasis on growing fall storage crops. So in September and October and November is really kind of when we're super busy trying to get things out of the field and get them to consumers' kitchens. And so I just wanted to shine a little bit of light on kind of our business, how we handle seasonality and everything. So while yes, all of our employees are seasonal, and we employ people starting in March, and they work usually, some work into December a little bit. But for myself and my parents, we're really working all year round. So just a little insight into what I do in the winter, I thought people might find interesting. So we're still employing currently 3 full-time people, 1 part-time person, and the 3 of us. And then that'll slow down in around Thanksgiving. And after that, we're busy planning for the next season. So that includes buying seeds, meeting with our wholesale accounts where we sell things, creating our seeding and planting charts, hiring people for the next season. We're still delivering to places like the co-op twice a week, pretty much I mean, it depends on how long we have things, but usually through January. So just busy doing lots of those other behind the scene things. And just as we're kind of getting toward that time of the year, I thought it would be interesting to just share that with everyone, because I know people are also starting to put away their gardens and kind of close down that chapter of their season. But for us, it's kind of ramping up in a different way. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, the seasonality of the Vermont food production is very different than other parts of the country. And yeah, if people are not growing their own food, then they're not understanding that fully.
Right.
Yeah.
I can go next. This question kind of plays on something that I feel like I'm always talking about to people who know me, which is this idea that jobs in food service are real jobs. And I think, you know, many of us like to eat out, and we live in a culture where like restaurants are pretty normalized, but I think we don't always think about the value of the people working in that area. You know, because like whether you're washing dishes or you're running a kitchen, like those can be extremely and equally complex and physically and mentally demanding jobs. And I can think of times where I've had people working next to me in a restaurant who aren't old enough to drive, but they are incredible employees who are doing a better job than sometimes the middle-aged adults who might apply to work with us. And so, you know, I think it's an important part of our food system to consider restaurants as a part of that. And within that, like, what are the jobs that we don't think about, or the jobs that are faceless? And I think that also includes people working in food service and hospitality. And I think that has ramifications beyond just how we pay those people, but also like how we treat them as customers or consumers. And even how we conceptualize, like, is that something I could do as a career, as opposed to, is that something I do for the summer before I go back to the rest of my life? And so I think that it's particularly interesting in a place like Vermont, where we have some really big seasonal pops for tourism. And restaurants are a part of our local economy that really rely on that influx of people and businesses. But at the same time, like, unemployment, I think, is supposed to be at a record low right now. And so that means that, like many other parts of our state, like all of those businesses that help support tourism to the area are experiencing this weird, like, more customers than we've seen in 2 years. And at the same time, like, we don't have enough people to provide them any food. Yeah. And so I think, like, it's just a piece that maybe, unless you've worked in a restaurant or in food service, it's sometimes really hard to conceptualize, and understandably, because you're only seeing one very small facet of it when you order food or sit down at a table. But it's something that, you know, especially right now, that I think about a lot when it comes to working in food service.
Yeah, we've all heard about the squeeze of labor, and I think it's being felt all across the country, and specifically in food and hospitality. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Samantha. I really appreciate that perspective about food service and being a food service worker, and I can ditto that. And in my years of waitressing, as a second job, because I didn't earn enough money working in school food, I would work as a waitress. And I always thought of it as complex as being a triage nurse, right? Because you have all of these things going on at the same time, and you really have to manage your time and space well. And in school nutrition programs, I would add to that complexity of having the skill, and there's a lot of skills and learning that go on to be a food service worker in a school nutrition program, including when the pandemic started, realizing that the people in the school, besides the nurses who were most accustomed to dealing with mitigating the transmission of disease or you know, of safety, were our school nutrition professionals who are trained in some sort of food safety program. Additionally, school nutrition programs are the most heavily regulated programs that the USDA funds. So we are told in school nutrition programs what we can serve, how much of what we can serve, right down to the subgroups of vegetables that we serve in a week's time. So we have a certain amount of volume of vegetables in the red orange category, in the leafy green category, in the starchy category, certain amount of meat alternates in the protein category. So super regulated about how much we can serve, when we can serve it, the way in which we serve it, and how much we can charge or not charge, as well as how we purchase food, where we purchase food, what kind of product formulations that we have around the food. Is it whole grain rich? And does the manufacturer have a statement telling us what exactly, how it credits in a meal pattern? And also our payroll is dictated to us by the district. And I feel fortunate enough to work in a district that pays fair, and school nutrition professionals often have access to benefits that restaurant workers often don't have access to, like paid holidays, healthcare, full healthcare benefits. So in many districts, that is the case, as well as ACSD. And that school nutrition programs are often the only place that a student or child can get a full nutritious meal in a day for those kids who are food insecure. There's many who are not, but there are also many food insecure children. And food insecurity does not necessarily only mean financial ability to purchase the food. I think that we have to consider that term much more broadly than we already do. And that probably would help Anna segue into what she does.
Yeah, it's a great segue. And one of the things that I think about a lot in terms of the work that I do is the different circumstances that the people we serve are in. And because I'm fairly new to this job, I am still learning that, but some of the people that we serve may not have a kitchen. They may live in a hotel. They may be homeless. They may have a family and have a beautiful kitchen, but not a budget to buy the food they want to provide for their families. And so thinking about how we help to meet all of those needs is an interesting challenge, I guess. And I'll also just throw out a statistic that according to Feeding America, 1 in 9 people in Vermont face hunger. And through the work that we do, we try to mitigate that, I guess, through a number of avenues. And so just to share sort of some of the work that we do, we have a food shelf here, and income eligible people can come once a month and get staple items from the food shelf. And then we also have a surplus area where people can come once a day. And in the surplus area, that includes surplus from the grocery store. So things that either they order too much, or more commonly, they're reaching their expiration date and it's product that just needs to be moved. That we are also part of the Vermont Gleaning Collective, and Golden Russet Farm certainly supports our efforts a lot in providing produce, and many of our local farms do. And so through that program, we glean produce from farms. So crops that may be in surplus or that aren't marketable, but are totally edible and nutritious. And so we try to bring that produce here and then distribute it to the community. I think it's also that being part of the Gleaning Network is a way to strengthen the local economy, and also decrease the distance food is traveling. Last year, we gleaned 36,000 pounds from local farms. And so I have to give a big shout out to our local farmers. And we also, in addition to vegetables, we get local milk and eggs. So we have a food shelf, we have a surplus area. We also have a holiday meal box program. So people can sign up to get the fixings to prepare meals for the holidays. And we're also a distribution site for commodity boxes, which is a food bank program for people, income eligible people over the age of 60. And so they get a monthly box of food of kind of shelf stable staple items. Is that?
Just with that one question, I feel like there's so many things that we could dive into more. The humanity in food service workers, understanding that food security is more than just financial, the seasonality of farming and what's actually going on behind the scenes. And I see there's some comments coming in, but I'm going to move on to our next question, which is, COVID has helped us focus on what to value and what's most important. What has COVID allowed to happen within your professional world that wasn't otherwise possible, or perhaps was more of a challenge pre-COVID? And this can be thought of, we're watering the flowers, not the weeds.
I don't mind going. I really like this question because I think it's so easy to feel just down about the never-ending COVID. But there actually has been a lot of things that it has made possible. And so like I can say within my professional world, like one of the biggest things that I feel really good about is that Flatbread was closed for a period of 2 months right when the pandemic began, because we wanted to try and have some procedures in place to keep employees safe. And, you know, at first you couldn't get tested if you were sick unless you were super at risk. And most of our employees are healthy young people. So we closed for about 2 months. And when we reopened, the decision was made to take that opportunity as a time to change the way that we pay employees. And so what we did is we substantially raised wages for every position in the kitchen. So that we no longer have tipped employees, which are employees like servers who are paid below minimum wage with the expectation that tips from customers will make up the difference. And so instead, we're able to pay all of our employees substantially higher at a totally equal base rate, so that we're then able to share tips among all of our employees. We never did this before because there's always this fear that you would lose employees. If anyone who's ever waited tables or bartended before knows that, like, on a really good night, you can make a lot of money in tips. And we were afraid that we would lose those really good employees because they would not want to give up the opportunity, the possibility of taking home those tips. But what we found is that, like, it's been an incredibly positive response from our employees, which feels great to be able to have more equity in the way we treat people. And it also means, like, there are nights where I have employees who are making more per hour than I am because they're taking home all of those tips. And I think that's great, especially when you're hiring students who are saving for college or saving for tuition, or, you know, they're at that point in their life where they're trying to think about what they want to do next. And having a little financial stability is going to help. Some other things that have been really possible for us with COVID is we were able to make some really big updates to our space. It's really hard to conceive of closing a restaurant for even a few days to make repairs. And so we're like, well, if nobody's coming inside, it's time to fix everything. So that has been a really great part of the last 1.5 to 2 years. And then the other thing that I think has been really nice about this time is that for the employees that we've managed to retain through all of this, it feels like there's a different kind of buy-in. And I think a lot of that's due to the idea that, like, you know, we have this shared experience in something that's really difficult. And We also are in this place where people are able to feel more appreciated, whether it's because they're being paid more or because we're able to show that we care about staff by keeping them safe. And I think that's been a really nice part of this, is like we're a smaller group of staff, but I feel like in some ways it's a lot more cohesive. And then the last thing that's been great is we've been able to participate in some programs that are happening to address some food insecurity in the area, which is not something that we would have felt like we had the time to do before. So like right now we participate in sending meals to the Giving Fridge, for which we receive a reimbursement each week, which feels really good to me because I've always thought that like we have this idea in our culture that if you are food insecure or if you don't have a lot of money, you shouldn't be going out. That's something that you can only do if you have means. And I think that's kind of sad. Like everybody deserves to be fed food. Everybody deserves an experience where somebody brings that to you and you don't have to clean up. And everybody deserves the ability to eat a restaurant quality meal. And, you know, programs like the Giving Fridge are helping us to make that a little bit more possible, which has only been possible because of where we're at with COVID.
I never thought about renovations in restaurants. That's like literally something I never thought about, but I can understand how that would be a very difficult thing to do. And yeah, I love that you're flipping wages on its head, paying employees better across the board. And yeah, the Giving Fridge is an amazing program, and the way that you captured that was really eloquent. Thank you.
Happy to go next. For many years before the pandemic, there's been a lot of movement among school nutrition professionals in Vermont, especially partnering with, School Nutrition Association, partnering with Hunger Free Vermont and other organizations to promote universal school meals. Really saying that, you know, the way in which we decide who gets a free meal is somewhat arbitrary. Folks fill out a kind of a shaming application, divulging their income again, because if they already are in other places filling out that information for benefits, and a lot of times they're doing it again. Many folks will decline doing that because they're not comfortable for a variety of reasons. Also, that application, which still exists, by the way, and I'm not sure that it will ever go away in the way we wish. The results of those applications also dictate other school education funding in communities, depending on the rate of qualifying students. So with the onset of the pandemic, school meals are completely funded at the moment through the USDA, through a couple of different funding umbrellas. In the first year, the funding umbrella was what we call the Summer Food Service Program. Everything has an acronym in the USDA, so that's SFSP. And that funding allowed us last year to provide meals for kids while they were home learning remotely. And that got a lot of attention because we shipped meals to kids every day on school buses throughout the country, really. And it was fully funded by the USDA. It also allowed us to serve meals last school year during school breaks, and so that folks who were food insecure for whatever reason had access to meals while there was no school. This year, we're operating under a new acronym and a new program called the Seamless Summer Option. SSO is that acronym. And that allows us to continue serving meals, universal school meals, to students during the school day. We're no longer funded for non-school days, but it goes a long way for us to achieve that goal of feeding kids, all kids at school, a nutritious meal. We provide kids with pencils, we provide them with learning materials, calculators, sometimes even backpacks, whatever they need to be successful at school. And school nutrition professionals for a long time have argued that quality, consistent nutrition is needed to be successful in school. And so that has been definitely a gift of the pandemic, if we want to call it that.
Yes, shout out to Hunger Free Vermont and all the amazing work they do organizing hunger councils across the state. If anybody is interested in diving into food security in their region of Vermont, I'd recommend signing up for Hunger Free Vermont or one of the hunger councils. Yeah, I can only imagine the bureaucracy and those universal school meals, and it's definitely a silver lining of the pandemic. Thank you for that insight. And yeah, I do realize that the rural Vermont meeting is tonight. That was something that we realized when it was too late. So for those of you who have to jump off, thanks for coming. And this is being recorded, so you can watch it later. But we will definitely coordinate with rural Vermont next year to not have our annual meetings on the same night.
I'm happy to chime in next. So when the pandemic started last spring, we were just about like 2 weeks into starting up our greenhouses. So we already had one greenhouse almost all the way full, and another one on its way. And we all of a sudden realized, like, are we even going to be able to be open this spring to sell plants to home gardeners? So there was definitely a moment of serious panic. And then we figured out ways to pivot, as most every business did. And our kind of the two strategies, I guess, that we started in on were, one was to offer a curbside pickup option, so customers could kind of pre-order plants, I guess, for pickup like later that week. And then after that, we started an appointment-based shopping option, which was definitely the much more popular option because then people could actually come into the greenhouse. So I really quickly familiarized myself with a scheduling, like appointment scheduling platform, which we got out through newsletters each week. And we opened it up so that at any given time, there wouldn't be more than around 10 people at the farm altogether. And to put that in perspective, we are only open for 8 weeks in the spring, and usually on weekends, like we have cars like totally filling up our driveway. So it was really challenging at first to figure out how we were going to be able to one, sell our inventory, and two, make sure that people are getting the plants that they really want so that they can grow their gardens every year like they do. And so what we found out through this appointment system was that it ended up basically just spreading out throughout the entire week when people came to the farm. So in the past, when people would mostly just come at a concentrated time, instead, because more people were either working different hours or working from home, we found that most of our customers had a lot more flexibility. So they were able to actually maybe come and shop on like a Tuesday morning at 11, when in the past they could only come maybe on a Saturday. So that worked really well for us last year. And we were pretty much only open by appointments last year. And this year in 2021, we kept that same model for a little while, and then decided to just open up once people started getting vaccinated, because that was also kind of happening like right during our greenhouse season this year. So yeah, after a lot of pivoting, we realized though people really want, like their gardens were super important to them. So we needed to do anything we could to get them their plants so that they could grow their own food. And we had 2 of our best seasons we've ever had, just sales wise, even though we were open in those more kind of limited ways. So that was really, really great to see. So we definitely did see an increase in demand for that. And then the other thing is that's kind of the spring part of our business. And then for the wholesale vegetable side of our business, we sell mostly all of our vegetables to the Middlebury Co-op. We do also have a small CSA, which is just runs in the fall. So next week is actually our last pickup for that. And we've definitely seen an increase in sales there as well. So people really wanted to join our CSA, which was great. And we've definitely seen sales increase at the co-op. And I think a lot of that has to do with you know, all of the supply chain issues that we keep hearing about, and the pictures you showed, Lindsay, of none of those were produce shelves, thankfully, because the co-op is still able to get a lot of produce locally. Thankfully, it's been a really warm fall, as everyone knows. So we've been able to continue to harvest things later in the season than we normally have been. And so they've been able to keep their shelves stocked later, which has been great because we've been able to continue keeping people employed later and consistently have food for a longer period of time. So that's been great. Yeah, I think that's all I have on that point.
I can chime in a little bit. So I think that we've all been challenged by COVID in so many ways. One of the things that COVID pushed us to do was to start delivery routes for and really reach out to some of the most vulnerable people that we serve. So especially elderly people and people with underlying health issues that weren't comfortable coming to our Middlebury location. And I think that we've all sort of learned how detrimental isolation from one another is. And COVID has presented opportunities for collaboration and creativity to find ways to support one another. And I think this is going to sound funny, but has made us more human in a way. And we are definitely also affected by the supply chain issues. And I think that again just highlights the importance of having a local food economy and having people know where their food comes and having people know how to grow their own food. Because I think heading into the winter for us, you know, I think that the variety of food items that we're able to offer will probably decrease. But the delivery routes is really probably the biggest thing that came out of, or that we were pushed to do by COVID. And so we have 8 delivery routes and volunteer drivers who bring boxes of food to people's houses.
That is huge. I want to really highlight that because home delivery in Addison County is a massive challenge for everybody that lives here. You know, the small back roads, how hard it is to get food to the far corners of the county. So that is pretty amazing work that's come out of the pandemic. And I know Tri-Valley Transit has also been doing some of those, also with volunteer drivers. I think they get paid for mileage, but that's, yeah, you're right. The humanity seems to be coming out within our neighbors and with each other, which is really a beautiful thing. It's pretty unfortunate it takes a pandemic for that to happen, but really interesting from all 4 of you. Thank you for sharing. I see that we have a question, a few questions in the chat. So I would like to go ahead and invite people, if you haven't already put a question in, now that we've discussed where we've been, we're asking you, where do you want to go? What do you want from us in this panel? What is your dream for our local food community? So if you want to kind of chew on that while we go to the chat box. I think Alex had a question early on. Where is that question? what are some of the ways that you all could see collaborating in Addison County? I know a few of you already do collaborate, but feel free to take that one, whoever would like it.
I can chime in quickly because I am, because I work with two people on this fairly regularly. So as Anna has mentioned, we are very, very grateful for the work that Hope does with gleaning from our farm. And I know many other farms around the county are as well. Anna comes out to the farm once a week to actually pick up surplus food that we have put aside. And also, I'm not sure how many times this year, maybe three or four times, has come to actually glean food from our fields as well. So most of the food they pick up, our crew's already harvested, washed, set aside, but then occasionally we'll have actual surplus in the field as well. So yeah, so we already work together pretty regularly with that. And then with Samantha, we've sold to American Flatbread for a long time. So we're really appreciative to have support from local restaurants. So I'm already collaborating in some small ways there.
And I have to give a shout out for the Everyone Eats program, which is funding a lot of the prepared meals that restaurants are making. So it was a program, some of the produce has to be purchased from local farms, and then it's prepared by restaurants and distributed to the community. And so it's kind of making a complete system and supporting many different areas of the economy.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think that like there's a lot of room for expansion with programs like that. Like it's funny now to think about how easy it is to see how we can participate in programs like that. But pre-pandemic, I would have been very hesitant to commit our kitchen to like, oh no, that's not possible. We can't do that. And it totally is. And it's been great to see how we're able to do things like that. And it makes me think that there's a lot of room for expansion. I think there's also, I see the potential of programs like that to encourage local food buying for restaurants as well. I think there's potential there. Because you have to, yes, for some restaurants, for example, you'd have to change the way that you order, maybe the way that you do it, the schedule that you're on, the processing that things take. But if there's this added incentive to do it because you're able to gain extra income and feed food insecure people in your community, I think that's only going to help push that a little bit more so that people are eventually more open to the idea of supporting local agriculture, buying local meat, things like that. And then it also makes me think that there's room for more collaboration here too for local restaurants. Like we have all these commercial kitchens, we have all these employees. In addition to participating in the kinds of programs that Everyone Eats is providing, like, are there ways that we can partner with, for example, like local school districts in times of need? Like, could we help serve as a commissary kitchen? Can we be an added space with a certified kitchen and a walk-in? Like, I think there's lots of room for collaboration there too. And we're so used to being in our little separate boxes, but we don't necessarily have to be.
I'm often thinking about ways to collaborate on different levels in the community. I collaborated with ACORN, which is how I got to know Lindsay so well in our farm to school grant, which we applied for and received. And also I think I helped ACORN with their online market and understanding the procurement rules that school districts have to meet. I do as often as possible make purchases from local farms within those rules. And that's something that at ACSD still needs a lot of work. It's new to have someone in my position there. And there's a lot of background work that has to happen there. But as well as that, Samantha, you mentioned about being part of the school district. I have thought about in some of our programs, instead of taking the reimbursement ourselves, like in summer meal programs, if there were restaurants who wanted to take on that that business basically, and the district could be the fiscal agent. You sell the meal, we give you the reimbursement. So the place where I thought about it, but it would have to be a place that anybody can access. So I had thought about it with Lake Dunmore, but because there's a fee to go into Lake Dunmore, that wasn't allowed. But I'm thinking about, like, for next summer, for summer meals, is there a business around areas where kids are often that could serve that reimbursable meal to them for the for the money, obviously not for them, for the reimbursement. I worked some with Anna and Hope, and we're talking about ways that we can provide access to what Anna provides for kids who are eligible for free and reduced meals. And finding a way to do that that doesn't identify them has been something that we've been talking about. But always open to ideas. How can we get flatbread into the schools and serve that for lunch sometime, or any other restaurant who's interested in being part of that? Those are all on the table for conversation. So yeah, collaboration is definitely something we're interested in.
Getting flatbread into the schools would bring a whole new meaning to, like, pizza Thursdays. Can you imagine?
I actually can imagine. I think about these schemes all the time. It's just hitting on that right one that is going to meet everyone's needs and be manageable.
I love the dreaming. It's great. I know some of these programs will get implemented, looking at who's here. It's cool. It's really cool. We had a question, if we could expand a little bit on, hold on, where is the question? How do we more broadly define food insecurity and teach what that looks like beyond the stereotypes? Maybe Anna, you want to take that one? Or Laura, or anybody else?
Can you just read it one more time? I can't.
Sure. The need to more broadly define food insecurity and to teach about what that looks like beyond the stereotypes. So I think this was coming out of food insecurity is more than just finances. It can look like many different things.
Right. Am I muted? No. Okay. Don't know that I have a great answer for this question. But I think it comes down to education and having the conversation. I mean, both, and yeah, and how do you break through stigma? I don't know, Laura, do you have anything to add?
Well, what I have to add is, how do we define it, right? So if we define, you've really said it in so many ways already in the conversation. You're delivering food to families. So food insecurity isn't that maybe I can't pay for it, but what about if I can't get to it for some reason? Or, I delivered meals over the summer to a mom who had the financial means, but she wasn't able to drive because she had a health condition that impaired her ability to drive. So, or, food allergies could create food insecurity, or health condition. There's a lot of, I think those are two very big things. You talked about it when we met in the past, about how do I access land? How do I access transportation? How do I access finances? Those are all, I think, fall under the umbrella of food insecurity. In terms of how do we change the story that people have in their minds about it, that's really what we're talking about, is how do we rewrite that story? So, and I think that begins here, right? It begins in this conversation, and every conversation that we have beyond this meeting, when we talk to our coworkers, our colleagues, our friends, and our neighbors, that we talk about it in a way that we talk about it compassionately and carefully, and about community. And I think that energy will grow. I don't think it's something that's going to happen overnight, but it will happen.
Again, bringing back the humanity of the situation. And on a similar topic, Buster was asking, how can we address the needs to build affordable homes for our agricultural workforce? Addressing this need is challenging and affects everyone in agriculture. Affordable homes are a challenge. And he talks about the VHCB's new program. It has a new program that needs support from our farmers, agricultural communities. Getting builders involved in building affordable homes for agricultural workforce. Yeah, this has come up in a lot of different statewide conversations that I've certainly been on. We all know that the prices of land have gone sky high with COVID. A lot of that's going to second or third home buyers, pushing out our workforce, making it very difficult for us to have people moving here and taking the jobs, even if they are paying really well, like Samantha was speaking to. And I wonder if anybody has any answers to this question or given it any thought.
I mean, we definitely think about this all the time whenever we're hiring people. We right now, for example, have someone who is already reached out who's interested in potentially working for us next season. And it's like, that's the biggest challenge, is figuring out where she's going to live, because she's moving here with her partner and their 2 dogs, and like, how can they make that happen? So yeah, that's definitely a really serious concern for us every season. We tend to have a lot of employees who are right out of college, mostly from Middlebury or high school. And so we've been lucky where they can either stay in housing that they had right after school, or they're still living at home. So, but yeah, definitely a big issue, I'd say, for us.
One thing that occurs to me too, it's like a small piece of this puzzle, but I think we're going to have to get more comfortable with paying the true cost of food, because that will allow people in those positions to be able to afford different kinds of housing. Because I know that there are places where they struggle with, I want to pay my employees this, but I think someone's going to bulk at this price, whether it's for wholesale produce or for a restaurant meal, or even something in the grocery store. And I think we have to start to get comfortable with not thinking like, oh, local food's expensive, organic food's expensive, but like instead recognizing that that represents the true cost of that food, and that's directly supporting people who live here. Nobody's getting rich farming, well, I don't think. And so like, I think that's like a piece of that too. Like if we're paying the true cost of food more, that is going to affect the wages that people are able to be paid. It's going to affect the people who are attracted to those jobs. That's going to affect the perception of those jobs as valid careers. And that has an effect on those things too, I think.
Which goes back to educating the consumer on why they need to pay more for local food. But then if they don't have enough, if they're low income and can't afford the local food, then we're back at where it can get quite cyclical. And we're certainly not going to solve these problems tonight. But they're all interrelated for sure. Bethany was asking, and Bethany's here from the Giving Fridge as a shout out. Thanks for being here, Bethany. There are still restaurants that I'm trying to encourage to buy more locally, but for things like meat, some are still saying it's too expensive or too labor intensive to buy locally. Do any of you see any opportunity for a town or county-wide restaurant buying program that could potentially help with lowering costs and reducing order logistics for all of the local restaurants?
Can I echo what Samantha just said? I think we have to get used to the idea of the real cost of food. I think it's unfair to consider lowering the cost, to be honest. At the same time, we have to address the financial inability for folks to purchase that food, but I'm not sure where we bridge that gap. In terms of accessing it, I think the online buying market is the perfect answer to that question.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question that we could bring to some of the meat producers to see if they would. I mean, yeah, the online market would work in that it's interesting because we're thinking of the online market as aggregating the producers for a large buyer, but if we have a large animal like a cow that many restaurants can buy from, we're kind of aggregating the buyers, which is just flipping the formula.
When I first started in school food, one of the first things I did in my very first year, which grabbed a whole lot of attention, is I purchased a whole beef animal. I had it slaughtered to my specifications. I had an agriculture license, a resale license for, I think it was $15. And I sold those expensive cuts of meat off to the staff at the school, and I kept the ground meat for use in the school food program. I no longer have to do that. That was a creative way for me to do something that had never been really done in Vermont. 15 years ago, we wouldn't have thought about buying local beef. Now I buy local beef at a comparable price to what I can get from my national vendor, and it's a better quality meat. So I would say that to restaurants who aren't able to look, the challenge really is, it's a lot easier for me to call Reinhardt Food Service or go onto their online ordering and ordering one-stop shop all day long. And I don't have to think about where am I sourcing this? When do they deliver? When do I have to place my order by? That's the challenge more than the price of it, I think, is all of the other work that goes into locating and procuring from multiple sources.
Yeah, and I'll jump in. I think it's, for some places, I think it's about like knowing where to start. Like, well, how do I know what farms I can order from? How do I know what they have? How do I know what their prices are? And that can be a big mental roadblock. But I think like a lot of the things we're talking about, like I think it's like a paradigm shift. Like once you make the priority the local food, then your decisions follow afterwards. Like I find personally that like sometimes it is easier to order from local producers than it is from these big vendors like Reinhardt or Black River, because like all the farmers I order from, I just send them a text message. They all deliver to Middlebury on the exact same days of the week as all the other farms. Like it is very, very simple. But it's hard if you're not used to that. I think those logistics can be really intimidating, especially in what is like a very demanding job if you are buying food for a restaurant or for food service in general. And I think the other part of it too is goes back to that idea of paying the true cost of food. I think that there are probably restaurants who are hesitant to charge what they should to make a good profit off of serving local meat because they're worried their customers are going to balk at the price, when in reality, it's just about paying what that actually costs. If it costs you more to purchase a case of butternut squash and have to peel them and cut them yourself, that cost should be accounted for on the consumer's end. And we should ask people to recognize that we're doing more to provide them with local food that's supporting the economy, that's fresher, that's healthier. And that is a part of that cost. It's not just somebody trying to like make a profit. I think so. Like, I guess like to say, I think a lot of the push or a lot of the resistance, the pushback to incorporating more local products, I think a lot of it's mental. Like, I think if people were able to jump on, I think they would see that like, oh, this isn't that hard. This isn't that difficult. We can incorporate aspects of this into what we're doing, but it's knowing where to start and then figuring out how to keep doing it. That's the hard part for people.
I'm seeing a consulting job for you, Samantha, advising restaurants on how to source locally. We have a question from Kimberly. I'm wanting to bring into the conversation access to the food that people are culturally desiring and wanting to cook. And then echoing on Kimberly's question, so I'll pair these. How do each of you understand or approach the cultural components of your work in serving your respective communities within Addison County, especially with the goal in mind of meeting everyone's unique needs and desires with dignity? And that was from Isabella.
I think one of the ways that we can address some of these issues is working together, and both with organizations working together to identify what the needs are, but then also communication is huge, and community building. One of the things that I'm trying to work on currently is how do we better communicate with the people we're serving, and how do we get feedback? And so I'm actually actively sort of trying to compile a database of contact information so that we can send out surveys and get feedback about what people like and what they didn't like and what they need, and all of those things. So communication, community building, working together to get it done and taking care. Yeah.
I guess the other thing I think about when, like, how do you get people culturally appropriate foods in this area is you also have to make the minority populations more visible and more integrated into the community. Because I think that there maybe even are people in this meeting right now who are thinking like, well, what groups are they talking about? What are those culturally appropriate foods? Because a lot of those members of our community are not front and center. We don't see them all the time. You know, I'm thinking specifically of like migrant labor populations who work on a lot of our dairies in Addison County. And we don't see them in our communities. So we don't even think about like, well, what are culturally appropriate foods for them? How do we get that to them? Like, they're just not a visible face of food in Addison County. And I think that's like a piece there too, is like, you know, like Anna said, like, how do you increase communication? Like, that is a kind of communication, like knowing who's around to understand what kind of needs there might be for more diversity in what we're eating.
I appreciate this question, and it really is a reminder to me that I don't pay enough attention to that. So in my work, especially when in some of our communities, we are serving the children of migrant workers. And so I appreciate the question, and it's something that I now need to, I feel like I now should ponder more, you know, and how can I be more mindful, or how can we be more mindful and inclusive in our menus and in our communication. So thank you for that. I wish I could tell you, oh, this is what I do, because I don't. So, but thanks.
This is reminding me. Oh, go ahead, Anna.
That, yeah. Healthcare, you know, the pharmacy or a pharmacy type model, I think could potentially be a good way to approach that, or at least to gather information through the healthcare system about the needs and desires of everyone in our community.
And Kimberly's adding that Digger's Mirth, in collaboration with Vermont Food Bank and others, have been bringing culturally responsive farm shares to migrant families in Addison County this past summer, and it went well. That's really cool to hear, Kimberly. Thanks for letting us know. And this is also reminding me, I was on a BIPOC food justice webinar last year that Skinny Pancake held. I don't know if anybody was on that. It was about a year ago now, I think. And one of the anecdotes that came out around culturally appropriate food was how hard it is to find collard greens here. And a lot of people are looking for collard greens, and they're like, there's so much kale. We don't want kale, we want collard greens. And it's like, you know, I've grown collard greens in my backyard and they grow really well. So like, that's a really easy thing that we can pay attention to. It's just asking the right questions. And like you said, Laura, like, you know, we're not necessarily doing it now, but we can start, and that's why these conversations are so important. Well, we've got a few minutes left. Does anybody in the audience want to ask a question with, you know, verbally and not in the chat? Happy to turn your cameras on, or you can see your faces. Or if any panelists have anything else that's come up that they want to talk about.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for recognizing our migrant workforce. they are in the shadows, and we need to bring those out of the shadows and accept everybody in our community. My work, I work in agriculture, and my small part is bringing advocacy and awareness to around the needs of affordable housing in our agriculture communities, because it affects so many, our local farmers and our workers, including those ones in the shadows, unfortunately. And we need to be supportive of those things. And I've been advocating very much so that our housing organizations learn those needs and take a proactive step and approach and do what many, 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 many other states have done, is built homes for farm workers and agricultural communities. And just the needs of affordable homes in Vermont is challenging for everybody. Vermont knows this, they've stepped up on this, but the missing part is the missing people in the shadows need to be addressed. The people working in the fields, that missing link needs to be addressed, and our housing organizations need to know those needs and hear from our farmers and workers and ask them to step up and build homes like other states have. And they have. I have lots of examples I could share where housing organizations have built homes in agriculture communities, and it's made a difference. And Vermont needs to do the very same thing. And some people may not have ever known housing organizations can build homes for farm workers. Yes, they can. And there's resources available to do just that. So let's just continue advocating, learning, and support everybody in agriculture. And thank you for this discussion.
Thank you, Buster. Thank you for that really powerful statement. It's well heard and received. Yeah, we've got one last question, and it'll be a speed round. If you had $1 million extra in your annual budget, what would you spend it on? Don't even think too hard, just go. We've got 1 minute left.
Teaching kids how to play with fire and knives, bringing cooking classes into the classroom.
What Laura said, and healthcare for restaurant employees.
I would probably want to build a new, more efficient, like wash pack facility for our farm, so our staff could be more comfortable and get around more smoothly, and we can just process things more streamlined.
I think distributing food to more of the underserved areas in Vermont, and education, food education.
And I'll go with my zero carbon food hub. That's awesome. Great question to end on. Thanks for being such an engaged audience. And thank you again to all the panelists for being here this evening. And if anybody wanted to ask a question that wasn't able to, if I can answer it, I'm happy to stay on. If not, feel free to go enjoy your Wednesday evening and enjoy the winter. It's been really nice being in community with all of you. And I'm going to stop recording now.